laughter started before she even reached the elevator. Nurse Courtney Ann Briggs didn't bother lowering her voice. She never did. She stood at the third-floor nursing station with two colleagues, coffees in hand, watching the small woman push the yellow cleaning cart down the corridor, slowly, the way old bones move when they've been working since 6 in the morning. Honestly, Courtney Ann said loud enough to carry, at this point she's more of a liability than an asset. Someone's going to slip on whatever she doesn't manage to wipe up properly. The two beside her, Tyler Nance and Brianna Kowalczyk, both junior nurses who had learned very quickly which way the social wind blew on this floor, laughed right on cue. The woman with the cart didn't look up. She was perhaps 62, 63, with silver-threaded hair pulled back tight and a name badge that read Oduya, Environmental Services. She moved her mop with the careful economy of someone who had done this work for a long time and intended to do it well, despite everything working against her. Her name was Eunice Oduya, and not one person on the third floor of Briarwood Regional Medical Centre knew a single true thing about her. Eunice had arrived at Briarwood at 6:15 that morning, same as always. She had parked her car, a sensible, forgettable gray sedan, in the staff lot on the east side of the building, changed into her uniform in the locker room, and collected her cart from the supply closet without speaking to anyone who didn't speak to her first. This was not shyness, it was observation. It was something she had been doing in one form or another for the better part of 30 years. She started with the second floor, the administrative wing, which was easier. Mostly offices, a few boardrooms, the long stretch of carpet near the entrance that tracked in mud and salt from October straight through to April. This was March, and the melt had begun, which meant the entrance mat was a disaster. She replaced it with a clean one from her cart. Nobody noticed. Nobody was supposed to. By 7:45, she had worked her way up to the third floor, cardiology and general internal medicine, which was harder in every sense. More foot traffic, more spills, more people who treated her as if she were part of the furniture, or worse, as if she were a malfunctioning part of the furniture that had the audacity to be slow about its malfunction. She was mopping a stretch near the nurses' station when it happened. A coffee cup, one of those enormous travel things from the Tim Hortons cart in the lobby, the large double-doubles that the day shift practically mainlined, had been left balanced on the edge of the counter. Eunice had seen it. She'd made a mental note, deal with that after the floor section near the window, because the morning sun was already making the wet patches invisible to incoming foot traffic, and that was the greater hazard. She hadn't gotten there yet when Brianna's elbow caught the cup on her way past. The lid popped off. Coffee, 2 creams from the color of it, spread in a wide pale arc across the freshly mopped floor. Eunice stopped. She looked at the spill. She looked at Brianna. Brianna looked back at her with the particular expression of someone who expects the problem to be solved without any inconvenience to themselves. "You should probably get that," she said. Then she kept walking. Courtney Ann, arriving at the station a moment later, surveyed the spill, surveyed Eunice, and laughed. A short, bright, dismissive sound. "Try to get it before the next round, yeah? We can't have the patients slipping." And that was when Tyler, leaning on the counter with his arms crossed, added, perfectly casually, "At the speed she moves, we'll be lucky if it's dry by Thursday." The three of them laughed again. Not cruelly exactly, they weren't calculating, they were just thoughtless, which is its own kind of cruelty, and sometimes the more durable kind. Eunice got the spill. She got it thoroughly, in the way she got everything. No shortcuts, no visible frustration. She replaced the wet section of floor with a caution pylon while she re-mopped. She did this without a word. What she also did, without anyone noticing, she glanced up at the corner of the corridor where the security camera was mounted, the one installed 18 months ago after the hospital's board had approved a full facility upgrade. She noted its angle. She made a mental note about that too. She ate her lunch alone in the staff break room on the basement level, the one the housekeeping staff used because the third-floor break room, as Courtney Ann had made clear 3 months ago, was technically for clinical staff. And could Eunice please make other arrangements? Eunice had made other arrangements. She did not make a scene about it. She ate a container of jollof rice her sister had sent home with her on Sunday. She drank a small thermos of tea. She read 3 pages of a novel she'd been working through for 2 weeks because she never got more than 3 pages at lunch. Then she put the book away, packed up her container, and went back upstairs. What nobody on the 3rd floor knew, what nobody in the entire building knew, except for 2 people in an office on the 4th floor who had been sworn to confidentiality as a condition of their employment, was that Eunice Oduya did not need this job. What she needed, to put it simply, was to know what happened in this building when people thought no one of consequence was watching. The reason started, as most things in Eunice's life did, with her late husband. Dr. Eunice Oduya had founded Briarwood Regional Medical Centre 26 years ago. He had started with a vision and a borrowed building and a staff of 11. By the time he died, quietly, too young, of the same cardiac disease he'd spent his career treating, the hospital had grown into a 400-bed facility with a cardiac surgery program that drew patients from across the province. Emmanuel had left the majority ownership of Briarwood's parent foundation to Eunice. Not the administrative control, she'd always stepped back from that, preferred to stay in the work he'd loved, in the building he'd built, but the ownership, the authority, the final word on everything from capital expenditures to personnel decisions. She had exercised that authority twice in 26 years, both times in writing, both times without announcing herself. This was the 3rd time, and it would not be in writing. She had started hearing things. Board members mentioned carefully that staff morale on the clinical floors was complicated. A patient complaint came through, not about care, about atmosphere, about the way certain staff members spoke in front of patients who were very much awake and very much listening. Then a housekeeping supervisor, a quiet man named Mr. Patel, who had worked at Briarwood for 19 years, submitted his resignation without explanation. Eunice called him herself. He was very polite. He said it was time for a change. He said nothing else. She had learned, in 30 years of watching how institutions actually work, that when a man like Mr. Patel stops saying things, it is because the things are too large and too discouraging to say. So she went to see for herself. She had been on the 3rd floor for 6 weeks. The morning Tyler Nance made his joke about Thursday, Eunice was in her 3rd week of documenting. She kept notes, not on her phone, nothing that could be glanced at or dismissed. A small spiral notebook that lived in the inside pocket of her housekeeping vest. She wrote in it during her lunch break in the precise shorthand she'd developed during her years as a business analyst before Emmanuel had shifted the direction of her life. Dates, times, specific language. The kind of notes that, presented to a labor lawyer or a hospital board, would be very difficult to characterize as exaggeration. She had 17 pages. The coffee incident went into the notebook. So did the name Tyler Nance, which she cross-referenced with his employee ID badge. She already had Courtney Ann Briggs and Brianna Kowalczyk. What she wrote, in the margin beside Courtney Ann's entry, was a single word: pattern. Because it wasn't one bad day. It wasn't a stressful week taking a wrong turn. It was the established texture of this floor, a hierarchy of contempt that the senior staff maintained without apparent awareness that it was maintainable only so long as no one in authority was paying attention. Eunice had been paying attention for 6 weeks. She had another 2 weeks to go before she was ready to do anything about it. She refilled the mop bucket and went back to work. The thing about Eunice that people on the 3rd floor had collectively failed to register was that she listened. She listened with the same complete attention she had always brought to everything, the same attention that had made her once upon a time very good at her actual work. She was quiet, and quiet people tend to become acoustic furniture. People talk around them, not to them. She heard, over 6 weeks, a great deal. She heard Courtney Ann berate a patient care aide named Sasha Ferreira so thoroughly on a Tuesday morning that Sasha cried in the supply closet for 12 minutes. Eunice timed it, not out of detachment, but because she needed to be accurate. She heard Tyler Nance tell a newer nurse that the previous charge nurse had quit because she couldn't handle feedback, which was a particular kind of revision of history that Eunice recognized because she had read the actual exit interview filed in a folder in the administrative office upstairs, which she had accessed during the evening hours when the floor was quiet and she had a master key card nobody had thought to ask about. She heard Brianna, on a Thursday, answer a call light in room 317 40 minutes after it had activated because she was finishing an online shopping order. Eunice had heard the patient, a man of perhaps 75, a Mr. Beaumont from the address his family had mentioned on a visit, pressing the button repeatedly, the soft electronic pulse of it, before she heard Brianna's voice finally saying, "Sorry for the wait," in the tone of someone who was not sorry and had not waited nearly as long as she should have. Mr. Beaumont. Eunice added his name to a separate section of the notebook, Patients. She was not only documenting misconduct, she was making a list of who deserved better. The day it ended started like every other day. Eunice arrived at 6:15. She changed. She collected her cart. Second floor first, entrance mat, the long corridor with the salt tracks, then up to 3. It was a Tuesday in late March. The light through the corridor windows was beginning to have a different quality. Not quite spring, but no longer purely winter either. Eunice had lived in this city for 31 years, and she still noticed that particular shift every time. That day in March, when the light says something is about to change. She was replacing the liner in a waste bin near the nurse's station when she heard Courtney Ann behind her speaking to someone a new patient carried. A young woman named Fiona Adjay, who had started the previous week and who Eunice had been watching with particular attention because Fiona was careful and kind and thorough in the way that good people in institutional environments often are before the institution does something to them. "I don't know why they keep sending us the slow ones," Courtney Ann was saying, and for a half-second Eunice thought she meant her. Then she realized Courtney Ann meant Fiona. Fiona, who had asked 3 careful questions that morning to make sure she understood a new procedure correctly. Fiona, who had helped a patient to the bathroom with a gentleness that Eunice had noticed from across the room. The slow ones. Fiona said nothing. She just absorbed it. Her face did the thing faces do when the body has learned to give the person doing the harm absolutely nothing to work with. Eunice watched this. She finished replacing the liner. She tied it off with a clean knot. She went to the supply closet on the 3rd floor, the one at the far end, near the stairwell, and she made a phone call. The call was to a woman named Delphine Osei-Warkentin, who was the Chief Human Resources Officer of the Briarwood Foundation and the only person in the building besides the CFO who knew Eunice's full identity. Eunice had hired Delphine 6 years ago. Delphine was very good at her job, which was why the conversation lasted only 4 minutes. "I'm ready," Eunice said. "All of it?" Delphine said. "Thursday. I'll send you the notebook tonight. I want the board chair on a call by 8 a.m. Wednesday so he's not blindsided." There was a brief pause. The charge nurse, Briggs. "Yes." "And the other 2?" "Yes." Another pause. "And the aide, the new one?" "Fiona Adjay," Eunice said. "I want a meeting with her scheduled for Thursday afternoon. Not disciplinary, a conversation." She paused. "A good one." Delphine understood. "I'll take care of it." Eunice ended the call. She stood in the supply closet for a moment, in the smell of cleaning solution and fresh linen, and the particular institutional warmth of a building that never fully cools, and she thought about Emmanuel. She thought about the way he used to say that the real work of any hospital happened in the in-between spaces, the corridors, the waiting rooms, the moments of transition between one thing and another, not in the operating theater, not in the boardroom, in the spaces where people thought they were unobserved. She picked up her cart. She went back to work. Thursday came the way things come when you've been waiting for them, both exactly on schedule and faster than expected. By 8:15 a.m., the board chair, a retired thoracic surgeon named Dr. Alistair Pembroke, who had been on the Briarwood board for 11 years and who held Eunice in the particular regard one holds for someone whose house you are living in, had been briefed by phone. By 9, Delphine had the documentation. By 9:45, 3 letters had been drafted. Eunice was on the second floor when it happened, cleaning the long administrative corridor, close enough to the stairwell that she heard without trying to, the sound of Courtney Ann Briggs's voice coming down from the 3rd floor. A different kind of voice than usual, raised, not laughing. She didn't go up. There was no need. Delphine was thorough. At 10:30, she took her break. She was sitting in the basement break room with her thermos when her phone buzzed. A text from Delphine Dunn, all 3. Fiona's meeting confirmed for 2 p.m. Also, she asked if she could thank the person who reported. I told her it was anonymous for now. Your call. Eunice put her phone face down on the table. She drank her tea. She thought about Fiona Adjie, 26 years old, 1 week into a job she had probably studied hard to get, in a building that had been trying, in small daily ways, to convince her that she was the wrong kind of person for it. She picked up her phone. She typed back, "Not yet. Let's give her a few weeks first. Let her find her footing." She finished her tea. She packed up her thermos. At 2 p.m., from the baseline of the 3rd floor where she was completing the last of her rounds, she heard, she did not see, but she heard the sound of a door opening and a voice she didn't recognize saying something warm, and then a small sound that might have been Fiona Adjie, 26, new, surviving a week she should not have had to survive, exhaling. That was enough. That, Eunice had learned, was usually enough. The part that people would talk about later, though later, took some time to arrive because these things move through institutional memory slowly, was not the terminations. It was what happened in the boardroom on Friday morning. The board had requested a full briefing. Eunice attended. She drove herself, parked in the east lot, same as always, but she went to the administrative wing this time. She wore what she wore for board meetings, a dark suit, a small gold pin that had been Emmanuel's, reading glasses she rarely needed but that helped people calibrate their expectations correctly. She sat at the head of the table. She had been in this room dozens of times. She had never introduced herself at the beginning of a meeting with more than her name because her name was enough. The full version of it was on the wall outside the boardroom in small lettered brass, Eunice Oduya, Foundation Coach Array. The plaque had been there for 26 years. She put her notebook on the table. She opened it to page 1. She read from it for 45 minutes, without drama, and the same voice she used for everything. Dates. Times. Specific language. The patient in room 317 who waited 40 minutes for a call light to be answered. The aide who cried in the supply closet. The culture that had been permitted to calcify on one floor of this hospital, for what she estimated, based on the documentation, had been at least 2 years. When she finished, she closed the notebook. Dr. Pembroke, who had been very still for the last 20 minutes, said, "Mrs. Oduya, may I ask, how long were you on the floor?" 6 weeks, she said. A board member she didn't know as well, a younger woman relatively new, named Dr. Vivian Cauticott, leaned forward. As a housekeeper, Eunice confirmed. The room was quiet for a moment. "I want a full culture audit of all clinical floors," Eunice said. "External, not internal. I want the person conducting it to have no existing relationship with any department head. I want exit interview protocols revised before the end of Q2. And I want Mr. Patel contacted about whether he would consider returning." She paused. "He's good at his job. This hospital failed him. We should say so plainly." Nobody argued. Nobody laughed. What some of them would say afterward, in the hallway, in the parking lot, in the particular way people process things that have genuinely surprised them, was some version of, "I didn't know," which was true, and which was precisely the point. On Monday morning, Eunice Oduya arrived at Briarwood at 6:15. She parked in the east lot. She went to the administrative wing. She had a 7 a.m. call with the external audit firm. At 9, she had a meeting with the housekeeping supervisor. Mr. Patel had, after a long phone conversation on Saturday, agreed to return on a trial basis, which was what he called it, though Eunice suspected he'd already decided before he said yes. Some people need to be asked more than once. She understood this. At noon, she had lunch in the third-floor break room, because Delphine had quietly let it be known that the co-chair of the foundation occasionally used it, and there had been no further suggestion that anyone should make other arrangements. She sat at a table near the window. The March light was doing its thing, the good thing, the thing that means something is about to shift. She ate her jollof rice. She drank her tea. A young woman with a careful face and a new staff badge sat down at the adjacent table. Fiona Adji. She had her lunch in a container that matched the bag over her shoulder, and she was reading something on her phone with the focused calm of someone using her break for actual rest. Eunice watched her for a moment. She did not introduce herself. Not yet. There was time. Fiona had just found her footing, and the best thing, the thing Emmanuel had always known, the thing Eunice had spent 30 years slowly understanding, was to let the ground hold for a while before you ask someone to walk on it. She drank her tea. She read her 3 pages. The light came through the window, and it was the good kind of light, the kind that changes things, and neither woman looked up, and the room was, for the length of a lunch break, simply a place where 2 people ate their food, and nobody was watching, and everybody was safe. That is worth more than most people think, until the day they no longer have it, and then they understand. I keep thinking about the spiral notebook. Not the terminations, not the boardroom, not the moment Courtney Ann's voice changed in that corridor, though I think about all of those too. What stays with me is the image of Eunice sitting alone in a basement break room, eating rice her sister packed for her on Sunday, writing in careful shorthand about things that most people in her position would have simply walked away from. 17 pages, 6 weeks, not because anyone asked her to, because she decided that what was happening in that building was her responsibility, and she was going to meet that responsibility the same way she met everything else. Completely and without shortcuts. There's something I've been sitting with since I first heard this story, and I think it's this. The way we treat people when we believe no one of consequence is watching is probably the most honest version of who we are. Courtney Ann didn't think she was being cruel. She thought she was being frank, efficient, among friends. She thought the woman with the mop cart was furniture. And that assumption, that some people are furniture, is the thing that costs us everything, eventually. Not because karma is a mystical force that keeps score somewhere, but because the world is actually much smaller and more connected than contempt allows us to imagine, and the person we dismissed today has a life outside our line of sight that we know absolutely nothing about. What Eunice did took something that I don't think gets talked about enough. It took the patience to be misread. For 6 weeks, she let people see exactly what they expected to see. She didn't correct them. She didn't hint. She did her work, kept her notes, and trusted that the truth would be more useful than the argument. That kind of restraint isn't passivity. It's a particular form of intelligence, the kind that knows the difference between winning a moment and changing a situation. I think about how many of us, in her position, would have said something by week 2. How satisfying that would have felt. How little it would have actually fixed. And then there's Fiona, 26 years old, 1 week in, already learning to make her face into a wall. That detail is the one that makes me catch my breath, because I know that face. Most people who've worked in an institution know that face, the one you make when you figured out that reacting is a liability. Eunice saw it, recognized it for what it was, and acted. Not because it was convenient, but because she understood that a person finding their footing deserves to find solid ground. Protecting that was a choice she made with the same deliberateness she brought to everything else. I think the thing I keep returning to is simpler than all of that, though. Eunice Oduya walked into that hospital at 6:15 every morning, and she did the work in front of her, whether or not it was the work she was expected to be doing, whether or not anyone knew who she was, whether or not anyone said thank you. She did it well and she did it honestly, and she kept her eyes open the whole time. That's not a strategy. That's a way of being in the world. And I think, if we're paying attention, it's the only one that actually holds up.